Good evening, I'm Doc Hollingsworth, Senior Pastor here at Second Ponce de Leon Baptist Church, and I wanted to say a welcome to those of you online and those present tonight, and say a word of explanation about how it came to be that we're hosting tonight's event. Second Ponce intends to be a part of the larger community here in Buckhead. Several of you are members of our Family Life Center, several of you vote here. Many of you taught your kids to ride bicycles in our parking lot. That's the kind of church we intend to be in this community. We host the Georgia Cotillion, the Buckhead Kiwanis, and who knows what else, because we've got the best location in the city of Atlanta, and I think the only free parking left in Buckhead. So we want this place to be used and to be a part of the civic conversation in Atlanta. So when Representative Holland asked if she might host a conversation with all of the Atlanta delegation of representatives invited, I said absolutely, because we want to be a good civic partner and a host. We're not sponsoring a campaign event, a political rally. This is an opportunity for us to be a part of the community with you and to show that we want to be a part of helping make Atlanta great. So welcome tonight to our conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the congregation of Second Ponce for letting us be here. My name is Representative Betsy Holland. I represent House District 54. For those of you who are in the room, welcome to the district. That's where you are. I want to remind everyone who's joining us virtually, please have patience because we have a live audience here at the church. To my live audience at the church, please have patience. We're also working with a virtual audience online. For those of you who are with us, please make sure your phones are silenced. If for some reason you're following along with the Zoom while you're here, please don't have the sound on. For those on the Zoom, know that you're muted coming in, so we cannot hear you if you try to say something during the live stream. If you need to communicate, please use the chat feature on Zoom or the chat feature on Facebook Live. To submit questions, if you're here in the room with us, we have microphones set up at the end of each aisle. You can just walk up to the microphone when it's Q&A time and ask your question. We'll recognize you. If you're joining us virtually, as I said, utilize the chat features either on Facebook Live or Zoom. We have folks here in the room with us who will then relay your question to us via the microphone. And then for everyone's knowledge, we are recording this live stream. So A, we will have it available if you'd like to share it with folks in your community. And B, if you're going to misbehave, just know your grandmama might see this someday. So we are recording what we do here. Again, thank you so much to Second Ponce for having us. I'm going to kick us off by asking all of my colleagues who have joined us today from the North Atlanta delegation, asking them to introduce themselves and let us know whereabouts their district is, at least for now, because one of the things we'll talk about today is how that might all change. I'll start on the end with Representative Becky Evans.
Thank you so much, Chair Holland. I appreciate that. Yes, my name is Representative Becky Evans, and our district is House District 83. It's an all-DeKalb district serving portions of unincorporated DeKalb, Atlanta, and Decatur. So I have Fernbank Natural History Museum, Calamald Arts Center, downtown Decatur, Oakhurst, Eastlake Golf Course, GBI headquarters, Georgia State at Panthersville, Seminole Landfill. All these good things are in House District 83.
Good evening, I'm Stacey Evans, the other part of the Evans Caucus with my friend Becky, and I represent House District 57, all City of Atlanta, all Fulton County. It is a gerrymandered district, if I've ever seen one, which we'll talk about that term a little bit later. It looks like a snake. It starts in the northeast corner of Atlanta near the Lindbergh-MARTA station, winds through Morningside, a little bit of Virginia Highlands, Midtown, downtown, and then takes a turn to southwest Atlanta, includes neighborhoods such as West End, Westview, Adair Park, Pittsburgh, all the way down to Venetian Hills.
I'm Erick Allen. I represent District 40, which straddles the Cobb and Fulton line. So I represent all of Vinings, a little bit of Smyrna, and on the Fulton County side, North Atlanta. So it includes the areas of North Atlanta High School, Warren T. Jackson, down Mount Perrin to the old country store, then back north toward 285. So thank you for having us.
Good evening. I'm Senator Sonya Halpern. I represent District 39, which includes where we are right now as well. So my district is completely in Fulton County, and it snakes much like Representative Evans. It literally looks like a snake. But the Atlanta side starts north here in Buckhead, and it snakes through Midtown, west side of Atlanta, on down to southwest Atlanta. But it continues on to College Park, East Point, City of South Fulton, and a little bit of Union City as well.
Good evening. My name is Shea Roberts, and I'm the newly elected rep for House District 52, which is fully encompassed in Fulton County. In North Atlanta, I have Chastain Park and Tuxedo Park, and then I go into the city of Sandy Springs, all the way up Roswell Road, for those of you familiar, up kind of near Dalrymple, west to the river. I have some on the east side too, but it's also gerrymandered, kind of crossing the road. I'm very excited to be here with you all tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is State Senator Jen Jordan. I represent Senate District 6. And like everyone else up here, mine is gerrymandered as well. And it looks like a kidney bean. Half is in Fulton and half is in Cobb County. So in terms of Fulton, I've got parts of Buckhead, Chastain, Tuxedo Park, go up and grab Sandy Springs, cross over, I have Vinings, Smyrna, and then it goes up and grabs part of Marietta. So really just happy to be here tonight. And, you know, it's really interesting, and I'm glad that y'all are interested in hearing more about redistricting.
Thank you, Senator. Good evening. My name is Nan Orrock. I'm a senator in Senate District 36. I have one of the more compact districts, but it has all of southeast Atlanta, and it has northeast Atlanta all the way up to where 85 crosses into DeKalb County. It has southwest Atlanta, College Park, East Point, and Hapeville. Goes all the way south to the airport, stops at the airport. And we have about 180 to 190,000 people living in that Senate district. I'm so glad to be with you tonight, and I'm sure you're all glazed over because any campaign consultant advises their clients, don't talk about your district lines. Nobody wants to hear it.
Fair enough, and yet y'all have all shown up to hear how we draw the district lines in the first place. So our lead topic for the evening is redistricting. That's the first thing that we're going to talk about. I think that we figured out that only 2 people on this panel have ever served in the legislature during redistricting before. So you've got 2 experts and 6 novices who are here to talk about it. But because of that, I'm going to throw the first question to Representative Stacey Evans to say, what is redistricting and why are we talking about it right now?
Great foundation question, right? Why are we here? So you've probably heard the terms reapportionment and you've heard the term redistricting. Reapportionment is when we change where the congressional districts are. So whether Georgia's going to have 13 districts or 11 districts over the years, it has changed. Redistricting is what we're about to do here in Georgia, where we take the 180 House seats and we take the 56 Senate districts and we try to make them approximately very close, the same size, so that we can respect one person, one vote, so that everybody's vote counts the same toward their one representative. And you don't have one district, for example, that has 60,000 people in it and one district that has 20,000 in it. And we do this every 10 years after we take the national census and we figure out where everyone lives. Then we go through this redistricting process to make sure that the districts stay equal numbers. And as you might imagine, some districts grow a lot, like probably all of ours up here, all the city of Atlanta, all the metro area districts grow a lot. And some of the districts in more rural areas, and right now, particularly in South Georgia, those districts have been shrinking. And so here's an interesting benchmark. There's 180 House seats in the House, and it starts at 1 in the northwest corner, which is where I grew up, and it goes all the way down to 180 on the coast. I remember then leader Larry Walker, who used to represent a district in Perry, talking about when he first started in the House, long time ago, his district was 90 at Perry, right in the middle. To give you a sense of how the population of Georgia has moved north, and particularly to metro Atlanta, District 90 is now in DeKalb. So it's gone all the way from Middle Georgia, all the way up here to Metro Atlanta. So as you can see, the districts in the South get bigger land-wise, while those in Atlanta theoretically should get more compact because more people live more densely. So in a nutshell, that's what redistricting is.
So that has brought about the question, we draw new maps, as Representative Evans says, and this was a question I had as a novice legislator. Who draws the maps? How are these maps drawn, and what data are we using to decide how these come together? And so I'll throw that one to Representative Roberts.
So you're looking at who draws the maps. The state legislature draws the maps. We have a joint committee, members from the Senate and the House. I believe there's 13 Republican House members, 5 Democratic House members on the House committee, and 10 Republican senators and 5 Democratic senators on the Senate committee. And they get together and with the House and Budget Office, what's it called? I don't know what it's called. The Reapportionment Office, sorry. And they draw the maps, and then we, as a legislature, it's a majority vote. And what else? I think that's it. Essentially, the only requirement is that the districts have to touch. They have to be bordering each other. They can't skip a chunk. So that's what we will be going back on November 3rd is when we go back for session. And we will be presented with the maps. And none of us have seen them yet. We're all in limbo and anticipating it probably as much as you all are.
So Representative Allen, I'm going to ask you a question that politically savvy people keep asking me. They said, I've lived through redistricting before. It happens in the summer. Why on earth have you guys waited to go back until November?
That's an interesting question, but I don't think we intentionally waited. 2020 was the census year, and just like everything else, COVID disrupted the counting and the processing of the data. It's been delayed at least 3 times, I think, from the original date. So the reason it's been pushed back so far is because we've been waiting on the data from the Federal Census Bureau so that the states can then process that data. And you're starting to see more and more states go into their special session to start drawing their maps. We start ours on the 3rd, and hopefully we'll be out by Thanksgiving. That's to anyone listening that can control that. Out by Thanksgiving. And we do realize it's later than normal, and you're probably reading some of the things in the press about, typically colleagues may be drawn in together and they shift and they move. Well, this will be one of those rare sessions where the maps are drawn so late that can't happen. So if you're drawn out of a district and into somewhere else, you're going to have to make some different decisions. So the delay was due to the pandemic, but I think there's going to be a ripple effect as we go forward.
Thank you for that. So Senator Halpern, I'm going to throw this question to you. A few people in describing their current districts used the word gerrymandering. So for those uninitiated, what is gerrymandering and why are we so worried about it?
So we hear that term a lot. What it is really, just by definition, is drawing lines in such a way that it gives, it is better for one political party, so it helps and advantages that political party, and it makes it harder for the opponents. There's actually a couple different kinds of gerrymandering. It really is political, which is partisan based. But I think most times when we talk about gerrymandering, we think about it maybe more in terms of racial gerrymandering. And so it's a really important thing to think about. There are 2 terms that you might have heard ever. If not, you'll hear them now. One is cracking and the other is packing. And so there are rules by which any legislature or any body that is drawing new district lines must conform to. You mentioned before that the lines have to have contiguity. They have to be contiguous, basically. But they also really, because of the Voting Rights Act and some of the protections of the Voting Rights Act, even though many of the especially Section 5, has been chipped away at through the years, 2013 being the last time, key is to not crack a district or pack a district, which would therefore minimize the voice of the people there. We talked before about one vote, one vote, one voice. Cracking is when you have one group, in this case I'm going to talk about minority groups, but if you've got people of color and you try to crack them, in effect you are trying to diffuse their voice, because you take a group of people and you spread them across so many districts that their intention and their vote actually gets diffused. Packing, on the other hand, is when you take a group of people and you kind of move them all into one particular district and leave them out of other districts so that you can potentially really have more power. So you might have one district that's predominantly BIPOC and then 3 districts that may be majority white, for example. And in doing that, the 3 white districts, in fact, end up with more representation than the 1 district of BIPOC folks. So that's packing. Here in Georgia, what we have seen more traditionally is the cracking, which was the first one, where we take people and we'll spread them out amongst so many districts that as a community of interest, their voice ends up being less effective through their voting.
So that leads beautifully into our next question. So Senator Jordan, your colleague just mentioned the phrase one person, one vote, which I also keep hearing, one person, one vote. What does that actually mean in terms of redistricting?
Well, it's supposed to mean that folks are supposed to have really the same, Sonya's vote is supposed to have the same effect or impact that mine is. And so you're thinking about that in terms of redistricting because like Senator Halpern said, I mean, you can move the lines in such ways where you really do dilute the voting power of certain groups. And it's been done in the past, and we know historically, especially in this state. Now, particularly with one man, one vote, what's interesting is that Georgia actually had a case, too, that went up to the Supreme Court at the same time, and it was litigated by Emmett Bondurant when he was a young man. I think he was about 25, for those of you who know Emmett. And it was challenging the county unit system. And so what the challenge was back then they gave power based on counties, right? So it didn't matter how many people were in the county, that county got the same amount of power as some of the denser, more populated areas. So basically you were giving more power to South Georgia or rural Georgia, while Atlanta, for example, that was dense and high population, had less. And so the whole idea was, you can't do that because every person in terms of, and this is why we talk about the population, because it needs to be one man, one vote. And to the extent you can with redistricting, you try to honor that. And you try to make sure that folks from different communities or whatever, that those votes aren't diluted. And so that's why it's incredibly important, and especially, with a state like Georgia that does have, a checkered past when it comes to racial gerrymandering.
So when I mentioned that only 2 people up in front of you tonight have lived through redistricting before, one is Representative Evans, the other is Senator Orrock. Senator Jordan just mentioned legal challenges that have happened in the past. Should we just assume that there will be legal challenges after this redistricting, and why? Why are we so ripe for legal challenges?
Yes, thank you, Betsy. I have, this will be my 4th redistricting session. And in some years we would be called back in again and again because there'd be a court ruling and it would change how the map was going to get redrawn to conform with the Federal Voting Rights Act. So litigation is absolutely predictable. A little note on, you've heard these curious looping districts that people have talked about that loop across Atlanta. That's because they were redistricted that way. You know why? To take an incumbent over on this side of Fulton County, or of Atlanta, and draw a district that hooks up with the house of another incumbent. And that means only one of them is going to get to run. It's only one of them is going to get to have that seat. So you take two incumbents, pit them against each other by circling their houses and drawing a little umbilical cord between them all across Atlanta, and you have a district with a number, and guess what? Somebody gets knocked off. It's a very, as old folks say, root hog or die. It's not a fun time, and anyone can get undermined. I've seen the party that's in control throw one of its own people under the hooves of the horse, throw them off, kick them off, and pick in favor of another. And the way this redistricting process is so cutthroat because it can determine who's going to be in control, who has the political power. So some people will be sacrificed and others will be elevated. In the Senate, in the last redistricting, we had the oldest Democratic member of the Senate, the longest serving member of the Senate, who lives down in Americus, and he was sacrificed. And his district number, he was drawn in with a fellow Democrat. Only one of them could prevail, so he retired. That's the litigation, which is even more keenly felt now. We all are very familiar with the voter suppression bill that was passed in the last session. And then they've been passed in states all around the country. Well, the way you challenge those is you will often wind up in court about the impact and the effect because the reapportionment map is a bill. You pass a bill. So that dealing and wheeling and any idea that the 15 members in the Senate reapportionment or the however many in the House draw that map, that ain't so. That map is being drawn in the back room right now before we ever convene in our session. And it's drawn exquisitely with high-powered computers that are able to notch out 10 people here, add on 3 people here to get the results, and they pack or they crack. And historically, we saw the time when African American members of the General Assembly were offered, we're going to give you a Senate, a House seat you're going to love. It's going to be 80% African Americans. Does that sound good to you? Yeah, sign me up. And the impact, of course, is that other districts were bleached white by pulling that many African Americans into one seat, into one district. And shame of it is, the joke's on you. You got a district that's going to be an African American district, but right over here we got 3 white Republican voting districts as a result because we grabbed out all those African Americans in those other seats. So it's complex. It's at best boring to many people, and it's inside baseball. And we'll be down there. All of as Representative Allen said, we'll be down there right up to the wire, close to Thanksgiving, and the maps will come out, and the majority party is bound and determined to have their way. I've been in the majority and I've been in the minority in terms of my party affiliation. Democrats ran Georgia for a long time. Republicans been running Georgia for a long time. And the party in power will use that power to draw the maps that serve their best interests, which is to keep them 50% plus 1 that can pass bills. Welcome to the party, and this is going on in all the states across the country. There's much more interesting data about how our population has moved and shifted, and it'll be there's not one person I think that could predict with exactness what the maps will look like, but stay tuned.
So I have one more question for our panel, and then I will throw it to questions from the audience, either online or in the room. But I'm going to throw this to Representative Becky Evans. So Senator Orrock talked about how fair these maps can be, tricky districts. We've talked about gerrymandering. So when the public, when this audience sees the maps that we're going to vote on, what are they looking for to know whether they've been drawn fairly or not? They can't take our word for it. We have a vested interest. So how do they know whether the maps were fair?
Thank you so much, Representative Holland. Yes, so I would like to bring up the work of two groups, Fair Districts Georgia and the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. I know several people that have been volunteers with this work, and their goal is to have nonpartisan, fair maps for Georgia, and they've done a really good job of using the same data that our reapportionment office is using to take the census information, and they've created a million maps, and so there's not one right map, but what they did that I find that's really helpful, and I hope you all can use as a tool, I'll be looking at it, is they've created some benchmarks for us to look at based upon this 2020 census data. And so as you know, as you've been hearing about with the 2020 census data, the metro Atlanta area has greatly expanded. The counties, like Forsyth has had incredible growth, Cherokee County's had growth, all of metro Atlanta's had some growth, and Henry County's had incredible growth, but the rural areas have, lost population. And so anyhow, for the benchmarks, I took some notes here, and you all can look this up. You can look up Fair Districts Georgia, look at their benchmarks. They have them online. But for example, for the U.S. Congress, so Georgia has 14 seats in the U.S. Congress. We should be looking for 5 to 6 Democratic seats, up to 3 competitive seats, and 8 to 9 Republican seats. And for the Georgia State Senate, there are 56 districts in the Senate. We should be looking for 24 to 28 Democratic seats, 1 to 7 competitive seats, and 28 to 32 Republican seats. And in the House, where I serve, we'd have 81 to 88 Democratic seats. That's what we should be looking for. And right now we have 77. So it'll be interesting to see if we get up to this 81 to 88 Democratic seats, 9 to 22 competitive seats, and 92 to 99 Republican seats. So these are some of the benchmarks that I'll be looking at, and I encourage you all to look at that too, to see for fair and transparent districts. I also have some data on looking for how many majority-minority districts we have, and they have benchmarks for that as well. They talk about, out of our U.S. Congress, we have 14 seats, so maybe one politically influential district, so a competitive district, and at least 4 black majority districts. And the state Senate, looking for up to 3 potentially influential districts and 16 black majority districts. And in the House, looking for 3 to 11 potential influence. So this could be, coalition minority, and up to 48 black majority districts. So these are examples of benchmarks that we can use to see if the districts that are proposed are fair and transparent, and truly give one person, one vote, and represent the beautiful diversity of our state.
That is so helpful. I hadn't looked at those benchmarks yet, so now I know what I'm looking for. So we are ready to open this up to questions from the audience. Before we do that, I want to note that I am keenly aware that there is a very important sporting event happening this evening that impacts Atlanta. 5-3, 5-2 in favor of the Braves. For everybody in the room who can't look at another screen, that's fantastic news. Thank you. My youngest fan is not with us tonight because he is at home watching the game, so he'll be excited. Excellent. So I want to look at the microphones if anybody in the room wants to come to the microphones on the aisles, or we can take questions if we have any online. If you don't mind telling us your name when you ask the question.
Oh, hi, I'm Amy Sharma. I believe I'm in Representative Erick Allen's district and Senator Jen Jordan's district. Nice to meet you guys. So if it's not fair, what power do we have as citizens of Georgia to fix it?
That is a great question.
Let me just add that you used to never see a citizen down there talking about a redistricting. It is inside baseball. And for the first time, and all of us have been a part of this, there are people coming down informed because they organized and they've made a study of the situation, and they've been coming down asking us to stand up for fair redistricting. And the redistricting can go on when we're not in this session. In between this 10-year period, if the party in power decides they want to do it, they jump up and draw them some little maps, y'all. And that was happening. And they called an 8 a.m. meeting to pass a map in the Senate. And do you know that 120 Georgians came down there, and that committee room was lined with the public? And you know that committee folded up its folders and walked out, and the map never got drawn because of the public participation. And that's a first in the history of Georgia. So that's one thing to do, is be present and be weighing in down there on a day-to-day basis. And everybody's got a senator and everybody's got a representative.
And I just wanted to add in, one of the House seats that Nan is talking about was yours, the seat that I'm in now. In 2017, it was one of the ones that was trying to push deeper into Buckhead to basically protect an incumbent in that seat. And it was because of the members of that community and also advocacy groups that stepped up to the point of where a lot of those legislators who were trying to draw maps to advantage them basically took their name out of the process and said, we don't want to be a part of this. So, you know, I've heard people say that it's more of a hopeless process, that the citizens can't get involved. I would encourage everyone to challenge that, show up, be informed, and make sure you reach out to your legislators, you know, and let them know how you feel as well, so that they have that to take back to the constituency and to the committees.
Just to add a little something, if the public and all of us weren't on the front lines when SB 202 was adopted, we wouldn't have had vote by mail. We would have lost Sunday voting. So it's really about us making sure you all know what's going on down there, and then us all using our collective voices to shine a light on what's going on. And so, yep. So thank you.
And I would add also that, as Senator Orrock has talked about, and as Senator Jordan knows because she was involved the last time this happened, there will be a court challenge to these maps. And so everything that goes on down at the legislature, the public comment, our statements in the well, is all part of the record. So even if it is your feeling that you're talking and spitting in the wind, so to speak, and no one is listening to you, it is becoming part of a record that will ultimately go up and be reviewed by a court. So either it makes a difference in the legislature or it makes a difference later. Either way, don't sit on your hands. If you have something to say, please come and make sure you say it.
And then just to piggyback on that, so as part of the process, there were public hearings across the state. Some were virtual, most were in person. But there is a link on our General Assembly website at legis.ga.gov for public comment that can become part of that record. Anybody, and I've been encouraging people to go to the website. There's a link for redistricting, and you will see where you can click to actually add your own comment in terms of what it is that you are expecting out of this process. And you can also read other people's comments on the issue as well.
It was a great question. Sure. Looks like we have another one in the audience. If you don't mind giving us your name and your question.
Hi, Jocelyn O'Neill. I'm from DeKalb County. Restore DeKalb is a group that I work with. And I need to invite you all to come to DeKalb County. I know some of you may not be representing that area, but what you're telling us right now is what we don't know about. And I'm one that will visit the state capitol during General Assembly time. I show up anywhere and to try to inform the people, but I need to get with someone because we need to get this information out. Thank you, Becky, for sending me the information. So, and dealing with the redistricting, I know with the census, and we're dealing with electoral votes and all that type of stuff, it has a strong effect on how the school systems also redistrict, because in my community, I live in the Greater Towers area, and my children graduated from the schools right there in my area. My grandson was with me when he was going to high school. He had to be bused away from the neighborhood, and some of the children that were right in front of the school were bused away. So this redistricting thing is not only for electoral votes, but it just jumbles up a whole bunch of stuff. And I fought for him to stay there, but it's ridiculous, just simply ridiculous. So I just want to make that comment.
And you brought up something that's very important for everybody to understand, is when we're talking about districts, we're not just talking about congressional districts or state house and state senate. It is every district that you vote in. So city council, school board, the lines in terms of, like you said, where do we cut off in terms of what kids are going to what schools? And so you have to pay really close attention, county commission lines. So if you think about like the people who are really making decisions that impact your life every day, when we talk about city council or county commissioners or school board, those lines are going to be drawn too. And so you really need to be paying attention to those, because I mean, at the end of the day, that's where the rubber really hits the road.
And I'll add also, not just the lines, but also funding. Federal funding is heavily dictated by the census, which is why there's always such a push to get people to participate in the census. We have historical undercounting in some communities, and that strips resources away, from healthcare to SNAP to infrastructure, all of those things. And the most recent example I give people is when you looked at the CARES Act and a lot of this relief money that was coming down for COVID, it was based off of census data. Certain communities received certain dollars based on population, and that was driven by census data. So it's too late for 2020, but as we go through this process and even going forward, it's always important at that decennial census to make sure that everyone is counted, because it does impact so much more than just these lines.
And just to clarify about the maps, so in our special session in November, we'll be voting on 3 bills, 3 maps: the congressional districts, the U.S. congressional districts, the Georgia Senate, and the Georgia House maps. And then we will not be voting on our county commissioner and school board maps until the regular session begins in January. So that's something I just learned a couple of weeks ago. I didn't understand that difference. And one other note I'll just throw out there for y'all's information is that usually qualifying for races is in March, and usually the primary, the past couple of sessions, has been in end of May. But the county election supervisors have written a letter to the legislature asking for qualifying for to be moved to April and the primary to be moved to June, because of the delay with because of the delay with these with the local election lines being drawn, the county commission, the school board. I mean, because those maps won't come out till January. So it'll be interesting to see. That will be something we'll be deciding. It'll be interesting to see if we do that or not. So. Is there some way that we find that type of? Yeah, well, I mean, I'll be writing about it as soon as when we know what it'll be. At the the speaker will be leading that process, but yeah.
If we have another question, and I want to piggyback on something you said when you talked about coming down to see us during session. I've had friends ask me, can you get me a ticket to come see you at the Capitol? And I want to be really clear. The Capitol is the people's house. It belongs to you. We get real bored. Come down and see us. Send someone to get us out of our seat and talk to you. There's nothing like seeing a constituent in person talking about something that matters to them. Please come see us at the Capitol. Do we have any other questions, either online or in the house? Oh, got one coming to the microphone.
Hi, Jackson Marks. I live in Betsy Holland and Sonya Halpern's districts. My question is, the Lieutenant Governor released a proposed congressional maps. We're fading those. Do you expect those to change very much, or do you expect that to be really the guiding line when going into this fall session?
So I don't know if everyone heard the question. The Lieutenant Governor, who is the President of the Senate, has released a map of what the proposed new congressional districts could look like. The question was, do you expect that's what the map will be when you vote on it, or do you think it will change? I've never lived through this. Does somebody with experience have an idea?
Well, I'll go first, and then y'all can kind of jump in. I'm not sure. I'll tell you that normally what happens is that the speaker and the lieutenant governor get together, and they don't release things separately. So what that says to me is that the speaker has not had any kind of influence over that particular map, how that was drawn, and usually the speaker has a lot of influence over particular maps. So with that said, I do believe that the way it's drawn reflects the strategy in terms of where the Republicans are going to go, but I don't think that particular map is the one that will actually get adopted.
Senator Orrock, did you want to comment on that?
Well, yes, my fellow senator made it very clear, I think. That's never been done before in my time at the General Assembly, where the lieutenant governor issues a map before we get into session. And the question is, who put that together? Was it solely his idea? And he's not running again. He's not running again. And he also did not support, he being Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, did not support the Senate bill that was drawn to block access to the ballot, voter suppression bill, we call it. He didn't support that. He left and went down to his office and said, we don't need that bill, and I don't believe in it, and I'm not going to preside while it's voted on. And he's written a book, too. So, and he's not paying me to be his agent, but all of that is backdrop to say unusual things are happening all across America, and certainly here in Georgia, that one did not used to see. And frankly, I think it's the fact that all sorts of normal ways and normal processes, normal procedures, honoring the past and proceeding in predictable ways, that's really less and less apparent in the political turmoil times that we're in, and this is just one more example of it. But what that map did accomplish, and you know it because you knew, the questioner knew that there was a map. What it did was it took two Democratic members of Congress's districts and made one of them real safe for a Democrat and made the other one real rough for a Democrat. That's a tale that we'll continue to unwind. Lucy McBath's district and Carolyn Bordeaux's district, two women that we're very proud of their work in the U.S. Congress on behalf of their constituents.
So in other words, you pop some popcorn for some of the drama that we expect in the next few weeks. Looks like we may have some questions from our virtual audience.
You have a lot of questions from the Zoom. Vivian Moore is asking, will the public be able to observe the legislatures as they are drawing the maps, and if so, do we need to RSVP?
The question was, can we watch while the maps are being drawn, or I'm assuming that watch the committee hearings, and do you have to RSVP to say that you're coming? Anyone want to talk about how you observe the committees? Go ahead, Representative Evans.
Well, as Senator Orrock very bluntly pointed out, the truth is that these maps are being drawn in a small room where nobody is. They're being drawn with the use of computers, very sophisticated software that allows you to carve these districts up. Now, when the district lines are debated, theoretically, in a committee room, yes. And you can do that through the website that Senator Halpern shared, which is legis.ga.gov, and that's legis.ga.gov. And you can go there on the homepage and see committee schedules. What you're looking for in November is just the redistricting committee. That's where the action's going to be on the maps, both in the House and the Senate. The rules committee, and then of course the general floor sessions. So you can watch all that, but I do think it would be irresponsible for us to pretend and to tell you that when you're watching the committee hearing and when you're watching the floor debate, that's where the actual work of the map is being done, because that's just not true. It's being done in small groups behind a computer screen, not in a public meeting. They'll have the public meeting later to talk to you about what they did. And I should say, we're all up here, members of the Atlanta delegation. We all happen to be members of the Democratic caucuses in the House and the Senate. This is a majority party run show. Right now, that majority party are Republicans. Years ago, that majority party were Democrats, and they did this too. So I don't want anybody to think that there's any party that has purity or innocence on this issue all across this state. And that's why I know a lot of us up here support the idea of independent redistricting committees, where you take, as much as possible, take the politics out of this inherently political, self-serving process where we're all up here drawing maps and deciding which of you voters will get to vote for us. But that is the reality of the way it is here in Georgia right now. It's a very partisan process. The real meat is done in rooms where you can't see, but you do get a chance to hear about it, and you do get a chance to make your voices known on it, as we've discussed earlier.
And just to confirm, as we talked about earlier, so that you can watch these committee meetings on Zoom or online, but if you do want to come down to the Capitol, and on the House side it's called the Legislative Reapportionment and Redistricting Committee. If you want to come to one of their meetings and speak, you are able to do that, the committee hearings, yes.
Okay, James Burge, also on the Zoom, has asked, in the past few years, the Atlanta suburbs shifted dramatically towards Democrats, allowing Democratic candidates to pick up many seats in the legislature, including 4 members of this panel. Has anyone here gotten a sense as to whether Republicans in the legislature want to try to cut their losses in the suburbs and just protect current incumbents, or will try to regain some of their lost territory in the suburbs through gerrymandering, which could potentially backfire if current partisan trends continue?
So I don't think I've answered a question yet. That's the fun of moderating. Some of you may have a different take on this, but essentially one of two things can happen, and I don't know which. Either we move towards continuing to have a Republican majority in both sides, but more competitive seats, which would shrink potentially what that margin looked like, or you're going to move in a position where you really try to protect the incumbents you've got and have a strong hold, but potentially then that means that margin gets even smaller. So I don't have a sense of which way we're going. You're either going to invest in saying we want everything as competitive as possible, and that means we could have a huge majority, or you're going to look to say, I want to protect my friends, I want to protect the folks who've been here serving, let's make sure we draw those strong districts, and we take a chance that means that the minority party picks up some seats. I don't know if anybody has better insight on what the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor are thinking.
So I'm not sure either, but I can tell you they're in a little bit of a bind because of the way the suburbs have transitioned, in that, for example, my district was gerrymandered specifically to give Republicans the supermajority in the state Senate. It had been an all Cobb County district. They pulled half of it into Fulton so that it was supposed to be, I think, 58 to 60% performing Republican district, which is what it did for many years until I flipped the seat in 2017. And now it's the opposite. It's about a 61, 62% performing Democratic district. So you have gerrymandered districts already, right, that are supposed to be performing at a certain level for Republicans, the party in power. And so so they're going to have to gerrymander on top of a gerrymander. And they're getting, in terms of where they need to go, it's getting pushed out more and more. And so now we're going into the exurbs when we talk about Forsyth County and Cherokee. So it's exactly what Betsy said. They have to make a strategy decision in terms of, what they want to do. And I love this saying, so I'll just say it. So it's like, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And I've always heard that in respect to redistricting right out of Dodge County, right? And so the whole thing is, if they want to keep more seats, they're putting themselves in danger from losing a lot more than if they just really double down with a solid majority, but just not a huge majority. So we'll see strategically where they go.
I just would say, we've been talking about redistricting now for some time. That's the focus of this discussion. I strongly urge you, get with an organization. Don't try to master all of this massive detail alone. It's laudable, but it's kind of Don Quixote. There's strength in numbers, and there are organizations. Representative Becky Evans listed too. I know fairdistricts.org and
Fair Districts Georgia, and also the ACLU has really been fantastic on this issue as well. They've been doing good work.
So I strongly, and I say this to anybody that cares about any issue, look for the group that's working on it, because there will be resources that are focused and available to you, and you'll be working with a group and have much more impact and speed up your learning curve and your effectiveness.
We have more questions. I am so impressed with our constituents that they are this plugged in and interested in redistricting. This is fabulous.
We just have a bigger crowd in our Zoom call than we do in person. Raul Santelices is asking, what is the process for passing an amendment to the state's constitution to eliminate gerrymandering? Or is that even a possibility?
Looks like Representative Allen's going to take this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was 2 years ago, Representative Matthew Wilson introduced the Democracy Act. I co-sponsored, I think some others did as well, to not constitutionally, but to amend our process to what Representative Evans was talking about, where you do have independent redistricting commissions that would draw these lines. And what that would do is strip the politics out, so that elected officials don't get to choose their voters. Voters get to choose their elected officials. So there have been some movement and some legislation drafted for that. However, the majority party who controls what goes through committee and gets on the floor has just a tad less interest than we do in seeing that legislation move forward.
Well, and to push even further, it's not just the majority party. To pass a constitutional amendment, you have to have 2/3 of both chambers. So it's one of those things where, not only do you have to have the numbers in terms of getting over just getting it on the floor, but you have to have 2/3.
It wouldn't, the Democracy Act that was drafted wouldn't have, I think that's going to be a question, it wouldn't have required a constitutional amendment. I don't believe.
Right,
So,
but the question was about a constitutional amendment. And also in the Senate, we have filed for constitutional amendments with respect to independent redistricting.
And this is a good chance for everybody here and for everybody watching on Zoom, for an independent redistricting commission to happen. The party that's in power at that moment essentially has to lay down power. So right now we're talking about Republicans not being willing to consider an independent redistricting commission. But for years and years and years, the Democrats didn't do it either. And so I know I'm going to say publicly, and I want you to hold me accountable, and everybody here would say this too, not if, but when one day Democrats are in the majority in the legislature again, I pledge to do everything I can in my power, if I am fortunate enough to still be in there serving constituents, to put my then power in the majority party to work in putting us into a state that has an independent redistricting commission so that those lines are fair going forward for generations, because the only way it will happen is if the majority party lays down power. And so Republicans don't seem to be willing to do that. I'd like to think that Democrats would, but it's up to y'all to hold us accountable on that.
Good point.
Clintisha Fleming is asking, how does Georgia use race and political affiliation to draw maps? Will the Freedom to Vote Act impact how they can use this information to draw the maps?
Well, that's a great question. So really two questions, if anyone wants to tackle the first one first. How is race and other demographic information used when the maps are being drawn?
Well, I'll start us off, and then others will hopefully jump in. Brings up an interesting point about gerrymandering. Right now, partisan gerrymandering, and the other lawyers on the panel keep me honest, partisan gerrymandering is legal. Racial gerrymandering is not. In Georgia, though, partisan gerrymandering is in effect racial gerrymandering, because the way that racial information is used currently in map drawing is to predict how the district will perform. If a district reaches a certain threshold of minority voters, particularly African American voters, you can predict whether that district will go Democrat or Republican based on past voting trends. So that's how it is used here in Georgia, and how it goes right up against that line of, is it racial gerrymandering or is it partisan gerrymandering?
And I will just make sure I'll defer to my attorney colleagues, but it's in Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. That's what dictates having a certain number of minority districts, right? Or am I not saying that quite right? Basically, I know that Georgia has a certain number of minority districts, and we certainly expect that number to increase based upon the diversity of our population. And I've heard that that's something that we'll look at, as far as the courts will definitely be looking at our maps to make sure that we have a certain number, that our minority districts, reflect the diversity of the state. Is that true? Is that when we talk about the Voting Rights Act, Section 2?
It's true to some extent, and because the Voting Rights Act has been so weakened, it kind of just goes halfway, right, when it comes to that and protecting minority voting power in the state. But I know a lot of the federal legislation that has been introduced and that's being pushed is intended to try to strengthen the Voting Rights Act, and also to put controls into place in terms of gerrymandering and the like. And like Representative Evans said, a lot of times race is really used as a proxy for partisanship. And unfortunately, if folks just say, well, it has nothing to do with race, it's just about the Democrats or whatever, a lot of times these maps can make it over the threshold in terms of any kind of scrutiny, at the court level.
I know we've passed the 8 o'clock hour, so I think we have maybe 2 or 3 questions left, and then we'll wrap up. So I'll check to see if we have any additional coming online or any other folks in the room who'd like to ask. So I think we have plenty online, so please, if you're in the room, you fought traffic, you get priority to come to the microphone.
Good evening, and Representative Holland, thank you so much for having this. My name is Kip Carr, and I live in North DeKalb. Senator, I'm a former constituent of Senator Orrock. Good to see you. And I had a question. First of all, I had a couple of observations. I remember 20 years ago when during the special session, I believe there was a redistricting process with the Fulton County Schools, which I believe the district that Senator Halpern, the school board district that goes partly in Sandy Springs and East Point, I believe that was created in the special session in 2002, I believe. So I certainly remember that. And then when the public hearing at Georgia Tech 10 years ago, all the Republicans from Sandy Springs said that they didn't want John Lewis to be their congressperson, and the end result was Barry Loudermilk comes all the way down to West Paces Ferry. So we certainly remember that process. But I wanted to ask Senator Orrock, as the oracle to this process.
How'd you know my nickname?
So since you've been around This is your fourth. I don't know if there's been a time when the numbers have been delayed, and the Constitution requires a legislator to be a resident of their district for a year before. So I think that puts us in a little tricky territory. Do you recall this ever happening before?
No, and for those of you that don't realize this, the president, as the census was cranking up, the president was President Trump, and he called the person in charge of running the census over to the White House and had a little meeting with him, and when that person came out from the White House, he stood at the microphone and resigned. So that's unusual, starting a major national 10-year census process, and somehow the person charged with running it for the government is dismissed. That happened, talking about unusual things. So that then started the process that pushed this thing to the posture that it's in. And I've been predicting for months, they're going to go into session after that year starts. They're going to wait till it's 1 year minus a day from next year's elections.
Yep. So for those who don't realize, if you want to run for a House or Senate seat, you have to show that you've lived in that district for 1 year prior to that year's election year.
That's right. That's in the
That's in the
constitutional
Constitution.
requirement.
So because the districts will be redrawn once we've already passed that deadline, no one has the chance to move potentially to stay in their district if they're drawn out of their district. So that's why this is so worrisome for a lot of folks.
And I just wanted to clarify one thing. First of all, it's good to see you, Kip. Just for those that are listening, that rule doesn't apply to the federal congressional seats. So when you mentioned Laudermilk and coming in with some of those, they are not held to the same standard of living in the district in which they're running.
Do we have another? Oh.
Repeat. So the federal congressional seats, the 14 congressional seats that we have in Georgia, the representatives in those seats are not required to live in the district in which they represent. So for us on this stage, once these lines are drawn, if the lines are drawn, approved, signed by the governor, and we don't live in that district, we by default cannot run for re-election because we have not lived in our district for a year.
Thank you for clarifying that. I know that's complicated if you're not someone who has to file to run for office. Another one from online. We've got two more. All right, two more from online.
Seats for the Atlanta Board of Education line up with Atlanta City Council districts. How does redistricting of city government seats fit into this process?
So I think as it was mentioned, while we go back for special session on November 3rd, that special session will only be to address those big maps, the congressional maps, state Senate, state House. It'll be during regular session, which kicks off on January 10th, that we'll redraw city council, school board, and particularly in Atlanta, your school board's seats are determined by your city council seats. Every 2 city council seat is 1 school board seat. We won't even start tackling that until the spring. Senator Jordan looks like she has a thought.
With respect to that too, they ended up, as part of 202 actually, they had to basically bless the municipal elections for this year based on the old lines because we weren't going to have the maps. So in some ways, it's a little concerning because I do know that there have been major population changes and shifts within the city of Atlanta. And I do think that the city council districts, as we will draw them in January, are going to look a lot different than they do right now. And so, but you then still have the 4-year term under the old maps. So, and of course with the school board as well.
Just to give a sense of how much this is shifting, and I think I have the most extreme example on the panel. So this district where you're sitting now in North Atlanta, it has 17,000 too many people in it right now. So that gives you a sense of how in 10 years, what population shift has looked like in North Atlanta. So to Senator Jordan's point, those old lines from 10 years ago, they're nowhere near accurate to make sure that you've got equal representation across the board. I don't think all my colleagues knew that. 17,000 extra people. Okay. Last question.
2 related questions, actually. Does the whole legislature approve the redistricting, and who has final approval of the redistricting?
if by approval you mean majority vote, right? So in the House, that's 91 people. It takes out of 180 to vote to approve the map. In the Senate, I can't do the math in my head, 29 people out of 56 in the Senate would have to approve it. And then I'm assuming, like any other bill, the governor has to sign it into law. It's like regular session, but these 3 bills happen to be the maps. So you could, in the House example, 89 people could vote no on the map, and it could still pass and be signed into law. And the governor has final say until the courts rule otherwise. Representative Evans?
I have a kind of a technical question for my colleagues that I've wondered about. So for the House map, will that bill be passed out of the House reapportionment committee and passed by the House and then go to the Senate, and then the Senate map will come out of the Senate and come to the House? Okay. Because, of course, as everyone knows, bills have to be passed by both chambers. Okay, thank you.
That's a really good question, Representative Evans. For those of us who've never done this, we have no idea what we're walking into, so thank you to our more seasoned colleagues. I think we are now at a point where we may have started to wear out our welcome at Second Ponce, so I want to thank everyone who joined us both virtually on Zoom and Facebook, and those of you who fought traffic and came here and joined us here. A few closing messages, so just a reminder, November 3rd is when we're called back for special session. I would say if your legislator is up here, and if you live in North Atlanta, at least one of them is, get on a newsletter mailing list or follow us on social media. We will be updating constituents throughout special session. Legis.ga.gov is the website we keep talking about that will tell you when the committee meetings are happening, and we'll have links to be able to watch them live streamed if you don't want to come down to the Capitol to watch them live. Regardless of where you live, I think, in this area, you have an election coming up right now on November 2nd, and early voting has begun. I would encourage you, nothing touches your lives more on a daily basis than your municipal and county governments, so by all means, I would encourage you to get out and vote and make real change there. Any other comments from my colleagues? Representative Evans.
I have just a quick point for the constituents that live in unincorporated DeKalb. We do not have any municipal elections, but there will be an e-SPLOST question, education SPLOST question on the ballot for DeKalb County schools. And usually there's an advocacy group that is talking about this, but this year I think due to COVID, the advocacy group isn't out there. And so our DeKalb schools does need this e-SPLOST for capital improvements. I'm encouraging folks to please vote, go out and vote an unincorporated DeKalb for the e-SPLOST. Thank you.
So again, thanking Second Ponce, thanking our handful of volunteers who helped us pull this off today. I want to give credit to Sarah Fuchs, who was the mastermind behind our logistics for this event. And colleagues, thank you for coming. It was nice to see you in person and spend this time with you having this discussion. So thank you for being part of this.
Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you to Representative Holland for coordinating. This was not an easy task,
pleasure.
so thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Be safe and have a wonderful night. Good night.